Hello everyone, I'm Broughy1322 and welcome to highlights from the 6th round of the Multi-Class Endurance Championship Season 5. Round 6 took place on Raceway, which, since Season 3, has featured as the third last track each season. With rain again forecast for the entire weekend, it was always going to be difficult for the drivers to pick their apexes and manage the throttle on their low grip muscle cars on this traction limited circuit. With tricky complexes of sequential corners, tight hairpins and fast dangerous chicanes, this challenge would all be about how consistent drivers could be across the 90 minutes. GT1 drivers this race were in the Pisswasser Dominator, with GT2 drivers in the Phoenix and GT3 drivers in the Picador. If you want to watch live coverage of all the races either before or after you've watched this roundup, check the description or pinned comment for videos that do just that, and for all the information you need about the championship, including past seasons, full calendar, rules and regulations and more, check the description and pinned comment for all the links that you may need. So as always, we're starting with PS4 GT1, and we had Ryan W1, winner of 4 of the 5 races so far, and Young Bright Hawk, who's second to Ryan in the championship, both starting at the back of the grid in this race in last and second last positions. So Ryan manages to get a great start and gets up a few positions straight away, and the situation that we were in with this race is that if Ryan were to win the race and Young Bright Hawk finished in 3rd place or lower, Ryan would actually win the championship with 2 rounds to go. But obviously that's a big ask, especially now that we also have GT1 Season 4 champion Murphos, who finished 2nd last time out as a reserve driver, returning as a permanent driver for the final 3 rounds to replace JJ Canucks in the LSDWP car. So what we saw happen is that Murphos and Ryan were working their way up to 2nd and 3rd, as we're seeing here, and Murphos is just ahead in the yellow LSDWP car, trying to take over the lead from the reserve driver that we had in GT1 this time. Murphos does get into the lead, but then there's a pretty audacious move from that reserve driver that was never really going to work. That runs Murphos wide and allows Ryan to then get up into 1st place. And that meant he'd gone from last to 1st in the space of half of a lap. And from that point on, Ryan ran out a solid winner. He never looked back. Murphos was able to finish close by in 2nd, about 8 seconds behind after the 90 minutes. And that was actually the same result as we had last season on the same track, but with the positions swapped, where in Ryan's first ever MCEC race under the name Nightmare, he finished 2nd to Murphos. You saw them battling in the track preview at the start. With Young Bright Hawk finishing on the final podium spot in 3rd, that gave Ryan W1 the GT1 championship with 2 races still to go, so big congratulations to him. It's been a very, very good season, and we'll see what happens in the final 2 races. With PS4 GT2, we had an early train of cars, which was actually pretty amazing, and it was quite intense to be part of. So AG Axel was on pole position, all the Maze Bank team were on pole position this round, and he was defending very well from Sherrod, who was in 2nd. I was in 3rd, TS Nobody in 5th, TS Nobody 4th, GT Driver 5th, and Brady was there in 6th place as well. But this is the train of cars that we had after the first couple of laps. It was absolutely incredible, and it was just amazing to be part of that. Now, when everyone else was still fighting, I had the earliest available opportunity on lap 5, which is the earliest point you can do that. GT Driver does the same thing. We both make our first mandatory pit stop, and initially that worked really well, because at this point, a few laps later, if everybody in front had pitted, I would have ended up coming out in the lead based on the times, because everybody was just slowing each other down enough that, you know, those early pit stop allowed me to run in free air. GT Driver did the same thing, obviously. But what ended up happening is that, as we'll see here from TS Nobody's perspective, Sherrod manages to get ahead of AG Axel and get up into the lead of the race. And from that point, he has the pace to drive away at the front and really puts in some really great lap times. Brady also manages to do the same thing and gets ahead of AG Axel as well, and they both, Sherrod and Brady, leave their pit stops until later in the race. TS Nobody comes in, and obviously that shows the impact that early pit stop had for me. But then me and TS Nobody start having a good battle over third place. So that's essentially how it all worked out, that I overhauled everybody who I was battling initially with that early pit stop, but because Sherritt and Brady were managed to get up into those top 2 positions, and they had ultimately the pace to carry on and finish in first and second places, me and TS Nobody were basically left fighting over the final podium spot. And it was a really good fight. There was lots of position changes, lots of interesting. It was an interesting battle over the course of the 90 minutes. But in the end, I just couldn't hold on. TS Nobody manages to get the overtake on me, and in the end, I managed to pull up quite a bit to the back of him by the very last part of the race, and I ended up finishing 1 second behind in 4th place. So it was an interesting race, but Sherritt ultimately never looked back. Brady wasn't too far away at the end, but Sherritt got his first win of the season, and kind of a win that his pace had deserved. Brady does get the 2nd place, which gives him a good hold in the championship, with GT Driver not having the best last few races, and TS Nobody got the final spot on the podium with me in 4th place. So as I said, the Maze Bank team were all starting on pole position this race, and we see almost as bad of a choke as what we saw from RDT on the Xbox side for round 3, with Happy Gster thinking he was in the party settings rather than the PS4 settings, and from pole position turns off his PS4. So that's super unfortunate. That crazy how muscle memory works. But yeah, that allowed Diglett, who was starting in 2nd place, to have a really good start, and obviously got away in the lead of the race. Now, Shady Fruit, who had won most of the races so far, didn't have the best start and was quite far down in the pack, but he does manage to work his way up the field, as we're going to see some highlights from here in terms of the overtakes that he's doing as he works his way up the field, and then sets about chasing Diglett. So he takes advantage of a few crashes here, as you can see. Someone misses a checkpoint. He makes some good overtakes. Horse Demo was in 2nd place during all of this, and then he makes a pit stop that gives Shady 2nd place, and then Shady Fruit is able to put in the lap times that eventually overhaul him. And then at this point, I guess Shady was relatively far behind Diglett, but it has done enough, like he's done all the way through the season, to put in the lap times and catch up. And after both stops had been done, it essentially all came down, after both stops had been done for Shady, I should say, it all came down to when Diglett was going to make his final stop. As you saw, Shady Fruit was right behind Diglett when Shady made his final mandatory pit stop. Diglett comes in to make his, and this is how close it is over the win and the victory and the lead of the race at the very last moment. In the end, Shady Fruit did manage to do enough in terms of laps, putting in the good laps to take that victory. Gives himself a really great chance at clinching the championship in round 7 with that win. Diglett is very, very close by in 2nd place, and Horse Demo does manage to come home into 3rd as well, getting another podium spot. So for the championship, like I said, Ryan W1 for the GT1 side has already won the championship, so everybody's basically fighting over 2nd place in the final 2 rounds. GT Driver and Brady, it's as close as it's ever really been. So going into the final 2 rounds, anything could happen between the top 2, and it's very close over 3rd place in GT2 as well. And Shady Fruit basically needs to beat Diglett and finish in the top 4 positions next round, and he will win the championship. When it comes to the team's championship, Presovex and Richards Majestic are already separated by 2 points after 6 rounds. It's absolutely incredible, and those two are definitely vying over the final, over the top spot. And we'll see what happens in the final 2 rounds. So now we move on to Xbox One GT1, and it was actually a really interesting race. If you keep an eye on King Blaze's perspective in the bottom right, you see that he gets hit, just a racing incident coming together into the first section of corners, and he's at the back of the field. Now, Blaze has won 4 out of the 5 races in GT1 on the Xbox One side, just the same as the way that Ryan has won 4 out of the 5 races up to this point on the PS4 side. And Blaze did have the chance to clinch the championship with 2 rounds to go, just like Ryan did on the PS4 side. But obviously that hit at the back put him to the very back of the grid, at the very start, and that was going to make life very difficult for him. So he immediately sets about trying to work his way up the field, which he does relatively well, and in the end he gets up into 4th place fairly quickly. It doesn't take too long into the race, but obviously he's lost a decent amount of time to the top 3 who had kind of gotten away. But then Blaze has a nightmare moment, going for a bit of a move here that it was questionable, ends up taking out a GT3 driver who then has to go back and get the checkpoint. This loses Blaze a lot of time, and even though this is also a nightmare for Recited as well, because then he gets hit by Edible Hornet for another GT1, so he just has a nightmare lap at this point. But that obviously loses Blaze a lot of time. He still manages to keep 4th place during all of that, but he was, for a long time in this race, he was out of it. Basically, we had a top 3 of R2XDJ, who'd been leading from pole position, Baggins and Trumpet. They were all battling it out for the victory, and they were the top 3, not separated by much. As we can see, there's Baggins taking over the lead of the race by overtaking R2XDJ. They're both very close, as you can see there, with Trumpet not too far behind as well. Now Blaze at this point, he took 2 early pit stops to get his pit stops out of the way, but he was still, even with the pit stop times corrected, he was still out of the race really. He was that far back. But the top 3, the problem that they had is that they battled with each other too much. They were giving us a great entertaining battle, and this was the battle for the lead of the race, and with Blaze being basically out of it, it was really exciting to see. But as you can see from the highlights, they're overtaking each other. That slows each other down. They're making a few mistakes, crashing into each other, and ultimately in the end, because Blaze wasn't part of all of this, he ends up, when the final mandatory pit stops happen for these top 3, first of all Trumpet here, Blaze gets up into 3rd place because he's just been able to pump in the lap times on his own. R2XDJ from 2nd place then comes in, and Blaze is able to pass him as well. And then Baggins also comes in from the lead of the race, where it had settled down a little bit from that point on, and Blaze is able to pass him also, and ends up going on to win the race. So, if you're going to win a championship, this is the way to do it, by being in last place on the very first corners of the race and making his way back up to win the race. Baggins ended up finishing in 2nd place, another 2nd place after his debut last round, and R2XDJ takes another podium in 3rd. But yeah, that does solidify Blaze to win the GT1 championship on Xbox One with 2 rounds to go, just like Ryan W1 did on PS4. So good race from him, obviously, and really, if any of those 3 GT1s had decided to pit and get out of that battle, I think they would have gone on to win the race, because Blaze was just out of it. But they gave us a great battle, but ultimately that handed Blaze the win. So moving on to Xbox One GT2, we had an early lead from PP Performance, who again for the Mazebank team was on pole position, with Matty H dropping into 2nd place, and then we had the 2 championship contenders of G-Ross and Charlie Addo in 3rd, 4th. G-Ross manages to get ahead of Matty, as you can see here, and then Charlie Addo manages to do the same thing as well. So that puts G-Ross and Charlie into 2nd and 3rd. Again, these 2 are our championship contenders, so they're showing their pace in this race. And then it was pretty interesting that the top 3 again, it was similar to not quite as many cars in the train, but there was still a little bit of a train in GT2, similar to PS4. Then G-Ross manages to get ahead of PP Performance to take over the lead of the race, with Charlie Addo doing the same thing, just like they'd done to pass Matty. And our 2 championship contenders were in 1st and 2nd, battling over the lead. In the end, as it all worked out, There wasn't that much difference between them, but Giros was the more consistent over the course of the race and did manage to take that win, with Charlie in second place and Matty H getting the better of PP Performance to take the final podium spot. So again, that really gives us an interesting championship fight going into the final few races as well, and it guarantees that the GT2 championship on Xbox can't be decided until the final round. Now, for Xbox One GT3, Major Copyright got a great start from second place, as you can see there, and manages to pull away with no traffic to try and get through. RJ Slow was in third place behind RDT. Again, these are our two championship contenders, Major Copyright and RJ Slow. But RJ Slow gets stuck behind RDT for a fair few laps. RDT does some good defensive work, and RJ Slow can't get through until later on in the race, which then gives, during all of this time, that allows Copyright to pull out a bit of a gap. As you're seeing here, Copyright's a decent amount in the lead in first place, as RJ Slow just manages to get into second now. So RJ Slow sets about chasing Copyright, which he does relatively well, and brings that gap down, especially as Copyright starts to make a few small mistakes, as we see there. And then Copyright decides to take his first mandatory pit stop, whereas RJ Slow has pretty much made it a thing for him throughout the course of the season that he takes very late pit stops. So at this point it was kind of separated by pit stops, but Copyright, after his first pit stop, makes a mistake and cuts that and rolls his car, which loses him a lot of time. And in the end, after RJ Slow did make his two mandatory pit stops quite late on, he was able to keep the lead of the race that he had all the way through and wins the race from there. Meanwhile, there was an interesting battle over third place between RDT and Sefzi, and this is how close it is after Sefzi makes his final pit stop of the race. Sefzi does manage to take that third place with RDT not too far behind in fourth. And just a little mention that Sefzi is our secondary championship GT5 champion this round, who was reserving for bar 27. And it was really nice to see a sort of we have the secondary championship, which allows people to have a taste of the MCEC experience if they can't get into the main championship. And it was really nice to see someone who's already won the championship with 3 out of the 4 rounds done on the Xbox side, having a reserve in the main championship and getting a podium from it. So good job to him there. Obviously in the Drivers' Championships, it's still all to play for in GT2 and GT3 as well, really, with GT1 has already been decided, with Blaze taking the victory and everybody fighting over the other spots. In terms of the Teams Championship, again, it's very close between the top 2, just like it was on PC, with Globe Oil leading the way 5 points ahead of Ron, the 2 oil companies fighting it out on Xbox One. And it's going to be a very interesting climax to the championship, I think. Now moving on to PC GT1, this was an absolutely remarkable race that it needs to be seen live to be believed. There were so many lead changes, crashes, overtakes, pit strategies all coming together that it's impossible to explain everything here. But basically, after 75 minutes of the race, with only 15 minutes left to go, the entire GT1 field was separated by a few seconds. And I'm going to show you a bit of live footage from that moment so you can see exactly what it was like, because it was absolutely incredible. Mindless Riff, ooh, in the lead. Dodgy, Eric is in second, Cleo is in third, Blaze is in fourth, Trumpet in fifth, Darnock sixth, Cloud in seventh. You can see the gaps between the entire GT1 field.
We're going to have the whole GT1 field finishing in the space of like 10 seconds.
Yeah, there's less than 10 seconds between them. The top 4, here they are, the top 4!
Meanwhile, Blaze is going for a move.
Yeah, Eric, got it done. Oh my god, that's the top 4 in GT. And all of this was after all of the action that we'd already seen through the race that I can't even fit into this video because it was non-stop action. So I definitely recommend going and watching this race, as Cleo there you see gets into third place by doing a great move, doing a Hakkinen really from Spa, using the back marker, and then gets him up into second place. Here we're sort of seeing how these top 4 positions were finalised towards the end. But yeah, I definitely recommend watching the live coverage of the PC race for this round. The links will be down below in the description. It was so good and so entertaining. But yeah, we had King Blaze was reserving for Kim in the GT1 race on PC, so he just won the championship on the Xbox One race in the race that we saw earlier, and then he moved over to the PC race and was fighting over the lead there as well. So it's difficult to do that, doing races back to back. We also have Trumpet in the race as well, who was racing in GT1 on Xbox One, also as a permanent driver now in GT1 on PC as well. But this is how it all sort of worked out. We had Mindless Riff, who was leading for quite a while in the later stages of the race, finally gets overtaken by Cleo, who had been the quickest all the way through, but just could never get into the lead and be able to pull away, was always getting caught up with other traffic or other drivers or making mistakes. Finally gets into the lead and is able to pull away over the final 5 minutes of the race, whereas Blaze manages to get up into second place with a nice inside move on Mindless Riff here to take second place. And towards the final 5 minutes of the race, it all started to calm down a little bit. There were still these position changes even going on to the last lap though, but in terms of the top few positions, it was pretty much settled. And then Mindless Riff unfortunately makes a mistake on I think it was the penultimate lap of the race. That gives Trumpet the third place, with Darnock taking advantage of that as well to take fourth. But Cleo ultimately took the victory, with King Blaze not too far behind in second place as well, showing that the top guys on each platform, they're pretty much equal in terms of how good they are, let's be honest, with Trumpet in third place, Darnock in fourth, Mindless Riff in fifth, and the other two GT1s were not too far behind either. It was just absolutely incredible to see so many cars fighting over the lead so far into the race. It was seriously incredible, and one of the best MCEC races I've ever had the pleasure of watching. You really do need to watch the live coverage for the full the full thing there. It was great. So moving on to GT2 with PC, and Danny Annie, as you saw on the top left, got a really great start, got up into the lead of the race relatively early. Deviator was in first place, obviously from pole position, again for the Maze Bank team, but Danny is able to get into first place as CT Ski also battles in they're sort of 3 wide going around this corner, which is pretty interesting to watch. But when Danny finally manages to get into the lead, he's able to pull away as people are battling behind. And really from that point, he never looks back. He's never really in any danger of losing that lead until late on in the race. So a great start from Danny and in the LSDWP car. And he's well on his way to potentially winning his first race of the season after finishing second multiple times this season. Now, there was a battle raging behind him between CT Ski, O'Darn and Mountain Jed. They were all basically fighting over second place, which O'Darn manages to get into that second place here. And then Mountain Jed also gets ahead of CT Ski, as we'll see in this same section. And they're basically all very, very close, but ultimately O'Darn was sort of getting on top of this battle over second place and is trying to obviously push on to catch Danny, who has a relatively decent lead at this point. Now the pit stops sort of change things up a little bit, but ultimately O'Darn still has the advantage in this battle over second place. Obviously you're seeing him behind CT Ski now, but that's mainly because he's done one extra pit stop. But unfortunately for O'Darn, this is where he ends up disconnecting from the race, and that was really such a shame because he was having a great race. So in the end, Danny was able to take his first victory of the season. Mountain Jed was in second place, not too far behind in the end, and CT Ski came home in third place. Obviously, after O'Darn's disconnection, he wasn't able to feature in the top 3. But congratulations to Danny, obviously, for putting in a great performance after so many second places I think he's had this season. Finally gets that win. Now, another great start from an LSDWP team member with Large Soda getting into the lead, just like Danny managed to do this time in the GT3 race. Jay Santos, as you see, for the Globo team, got up into second place, and those two were able to gradually pull away in the early stages of the race as we saw action happening behind. Beta 1 Hit, obviously, and Berserker are our two championship contenders in GT3, and Beta 1 Hit gets up into third place and is chasing down these top two, while Large Soda and Jay Santos battle. Jay Santos gets a really great move up the inside going into the first corner to take over the lead of the race, and Beta 1 Hit is just behind these two, chasing them down, but unfortunately makes a mistake by missing a checkpoint and loses a lot of time. You can see them just there, Jay Santos and Large Soda just in front after that overtake had happened, has to go back, get the checkpoint. Obviously, you know, makes that loses him a lot of time. He does manage to work his way back up, getting up into that third place that he previously had, but you know, he obviously had the pace in this race, but obviously that mistake put him quite far back. He gets a really nice double overtake here that puts him back into third place, but he's obviously lost a lot of time to the top two. So he sets about trying to catch up to Large Soda, which is made much easier by Large Soda having a very similar crash to what Major Copyright did on the Xbox One side, and obviously that loses him a lot of time, similar to what Beta 1 Hit, similar to the time that Beta 1 Hit lost. So by the time Large Soda comes in to make his first mandatory pit stop, Beta 1 Hit is right on his tail, and then when Beta 1 Hit makes his first pit stop, he's managed to do enough in the intervening laps to take over second place. But Jay Santos is still in a big lead until quite far into the race, where Beta 1 Hit manages to gradually catch up. Obviously it takes a decent amount of time to be able to do this. You know, these are 90-minute races, but as we're coming into, you know, the sort of last third of the race, they're fighting over the lead. Very, very close, as you can see here. It's really good fight that they're having over the victory. But then it's all very unfortunate how it turns out. Beta 1 Hit obviously gets hit by a GT1 driver there, which loses him a lot of time. And then Jay Santos gets hit by Odan's disconnected car that we saw earlier and loses the lead of the race from that point on. Now, by the end of the race, Beta 1 Hit had managed to pull away quite significantly, so he obviously did have the pace to go on to win, but it's a shame that the overtake only happened from getting hit by a car in that way, rather than, you know, actually an on-track overtake. But it was still a great performance for Jay Santos to get his first podium of the season. Large Soda got third place, and Beta 1 Hit took the victory to really spice up the GT3 championship on PC, and all of the championships really are very, very close to call going into the final two rounds of the season on the PC side. So should be interesting to see how that all filters out. In the teams championship on PC is also very, very close, as it has been throughout the entire season. LSDWP are only 4 points ahead of third place Pisswasser, with Ron in between the two of them. So with 2 rounds still to go, it's anybody's game really. Overall team points, it's really, Global have had a good week this week and the last 2 weeks really to stretch that lead that they have. It's very close between Ron and Pisswasser over second place, but with 2 rounds still to go, any of the top 4 could really take it. It just requires one team to have a bad race. So that's pretty much it for round 6 of the Multiclass Endurance Championship Season 5. You can either keep up to date with the championship live each weekend on Twitch, or just wait until the next episode of these highlight videos. And as I said, you can also watch the full uninterrupted coverage from each of these races with spectating and commentary for Xbox One and PC. I definitely recommend the PC race, plus my race alongside the footage from other drivers for PS4 with the live stream videos as well. All of the links for those, as well as any other info that you may need about the championship, can be found down below in the video description and pinned comment. Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.